Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Eruvin. We are up to Perik Gimel, Mishnah Hey. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'ilu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbai ben Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Menuchatam beGan Eden, Amen. This Mishnah speaks of a person who does not know whether he will need an Eruv on Shabbat, and if he does need one, where to put it. Its first example is that of a person who heard that tax collectors might pursue him on Shabbat, and he wants to escape from them, but he does not know whether they will come from the east, and he will have to escape to the west, from the west, and he will have to escape to the east, or from both directions. It is also possible that they will not come at all. His solution is to put out two Eruvin, one to the east and one to the west. However, a person cannot have more than one residence on Shabbat. Therefore, he must make clear that depending on what will happen on Shabbat, only one or neither of the Eruvin will actually take effect. Matne Adam al Eruvo ve'omer. A person may attach a condition to his Eruv. So for example, like the Rav says, if he wants to avoid tax collectors who might come from the east, from the west, or from both directions, or they might not come at all, he may put out two Eruvin, one in each direction, and say, Im ba'u avdei kochavim min hamizrach eruvin hamarav. If the idolaters who collect taxes come from the east, my Eruv shall be the one to the west. Meaning, the Eruv to the west of town is the one that shall take effect, and the other will be void. And the commentaries explain, a person can have only one residence on Shabbat, and the location of that residence must be established during Ben Hashmashot. Nevertheless, if a person puts out two Eruvin before Ben Hashmashot, it is possible to wait until Shabbat to find out which one of them was his residence from the start. Once that Eruv is chosen on Shabbat, it retroactively becomes his residence from before Shabbat. This is an application of the principle of Birera, which says that the status of something can be retroactively determined by an event that will happen later. And the commentaries point out it's actually a matter of dispute whether the principle of Birera is valid, and the Tana of our Mishnah is among those who accept this principle. So again, Im ba'u avdei kochavim min hamizrach eruvin lema'arav. A person can attach a condition to his Eruv and say, if the idolaters who collect taxes come from the east, my Eruv shall be the one to the west. Min hamarav eruvin lemizrach. If they come from the west, my Eruv shall be the one to the east. Im ba'u mikan umikan lemakom shertze lech. If they come from the east and the west, I will go to the direction that I will choose on Shabbat, and my Eruv shall be the one in that direction. Lo ba'u lo mikan v'lo mikan hareini kivnei iri. And if they do not come at all, either from the east or the west, neither Eruv shall take effect. Rather, I will be like the other people of my town who did not make an Eruv. The Mishnah gives another example. This one involves a person who heard that a sage might come to give a lecture outside the tchum of his town on Shabbat. He wants to hear the lecture, but he does not know whether the sage will come from the east or the west. It's also possible that two sages will come, one from each direction, or that no sage will come at all. He may put out two Eruvin, one in each direction, provided he make clear that only one or neither will take effect as follows. Im ba'chacham min hamizrach eruvin hamizrach. If a sage comes from the east, my Eruv shall be the one to the east. Min hamarav eruvin hamarav. If he comes from the west, my Eruv shall be the one to the west. Ba lechan ulchan lemakom shertze lech. If one sage comes to the east and another comes to the west, I will go to the place, the direction that I will choose on Shabbat, and my Eruv shall be the one in that direction. Lo lechan v'lo lechan hareini kivnei iri. And if no sage comes either to the east or to the west, neither Eruv shall take effect. Rather, I will be like the other people of my town who made no Eruv. Now, this Tana teaches us that if two sages arrive from different directions, he can choose on Shabbat where to go. Rabbi Yehuda, however, limits this ruling. Rabbi Yehuda says, if one of the sages is his teacher, he may go only to his teacher. Now, when he referred to the possibility of two sages arriving from opposite directions, the person said that he will go in the direction he chooses. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the commentaries explain, this statement was never intended to include a case where one sage is his teacher and the other sage is not. In that case, it is assumed that he would certainly prefer to go to his teacher. Therefore, if one of the sages who arrives in Shabbat is his teacher, the Eruv in the direction of his teacher is the one that took effect during Ben Hashmashot. Even if he claims on Shabbat that this was never his intent, we do not accept this claim. The commentators explain. Rather, we say that before Shabbat he intended to go to his teacher, and then on Shabbat he changed his mind. Since an Eruv takes effect during Ben Hashmashot, he cannot switch to a different Eruv later. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. However, the Tanna Kama disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda, because a person would sometimes rather hear a lecture from a sage other than his teacher. Since it cannot be assumed before Shabbat that he had any particular preference, he can decide on Shabbat which Eruv he wants. If both are his teachers, Rabbi Yehuda says he may go to the place he chooses on Shabbat. Even if one of the teachers is his primary teacher, who taught him most of his wisdom, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that he may still go to the other one. And the Rav tells us, the halacha does not follow Rabbi Yehuda. He might in this situation prefer going to the other sage over his teacher. And that is in Rabotai of Mishnah Hey. Mishnah Vav now discusses how an Eruvei Techumin can be made for consecutive days of Shabbat and Yom Tov, because we know the laws of Techum apply on Yom Tov just as on Shabbat. Rabbi Eliezer says, Yom Tov as-samuch le-Shabbat ben milefanea ben milacharea. When Yom Tov falls next to Shabbat, whether before it on Friday or after it on Sunday. Now the Mishnah refers to Eretz Yisrael, wherever Yom Tov except Rosh Hashanah lasts only one day. The next Mishnah will discuss the law with regards to Rosh Hashanah. Me'arev adam shne eruvin ve'omer. A person can make two eruvin in different directions, such as east and west, and say, Eruvi harishon lemizrach ve'sheni lema'arav. My Eruv for the first day, meaning the Eruv I will use on the first day of the Shabbat Yom Tov combination, shall be the one to the east. And my Eruv for the second day shall be the one to the west. Now the Eruv for the first day takes effect during the Ben Hashmashot of the first evening, and the Eruv for the second day takes effect during the Ben Hashmashot of the second evening. So for this reason, the food of the second Eruv must still be in place during the second Ben Hashmashot. Harishon Amarav Hashin al Mizrach, or he may say, my Eruv for the first day shall be the one to the west, and my Eruv for the second day shall be the one to the east. If he wants to travel outside his Tchum on only one of the 2 days, he can put out a single Eruv and say, Eruvi harishon v'hasheni kivnei iri. My Eruv shall be only for the first day, and for the second day I shall be like the other people of my town who did not make an Eruv. Eruvi hasheni v'harishon kivnei iri. Or he may say, my Eruv shall be only for the second day, and for the first day I shall be like the other people of my town. Meaning Rabbi Eliezer holds that although the Shabbat and Yom Tov are consecutive, each is treated separately with regard to the laws of Techum, and one can establish a different residence for each day. However, the sages disagree with Rabbi Eliezer. The Chachamim omrim, but the sages say, Me'arev leruach achat o eno me'arev kol ikar. The sages told Rabbi Eliezer, surely you agree that for a single day of Shabbat or Yom Tov, one can make an Eruv to one direction for the entire day, or not make an Eruv at all. But one cannot make an Eruv to one direction for half of the day, and an Eruv to a different direction for the other half of the day, because a person can have only one residence for a single day. Similarly, when Shabbat and Yom Tov are consecutive, since they form a single 48-hour period of holiness, O me'arev Lishnei Yamim, or eno me'arev kol ikar. One can either make the same Eruv for both days, or not make an Eruv at all. But one cannot make an Eruv in a different direction for each day. According to the sages, since Shabbat and Yom Tov are identical in regard to laws of Techum, they combine to form a single extended day. Now the sages proceed to suggest what a person should do when making a single Eruv for both days. Ketzad yaseh, how should one make an Eruv for both days? Molicho barishon u'makshich alav v'nodlo u'balo. He should bring the food for the Eruv before Ben Hashmashot on the first evening to the desired place and wait until dark, thereby establishing his residence for the first day. Then after Ben Hashmashot, he should take it and go home where he can keep it safe. Basheni makshich alav v'ochlo. On the second evening, he should bring the food back to the same place and wait until dark. reestablishing his residence for the second day, then after Ben Hashmashot he may eat it. And by taking the food home after the first Ben Hashmashot and bringing it back before the second Ben Hashmashot, he prevents the food from being lost. And the commentaries explain he must bring back the same food. He cannot use different food, because designating new food on the first day to be an eruv for the second day is considered an act of preparing on Shabbat for Yom Tov, or vice versa, hachana, which is forbidden. V'nimtza mistaker balichato. As a result, he benefits with regard to his walking, because the food will still be available for him to make a new eruv on the second day, which will allow him to walk an additional 2,000 amot in that direction. Umistaker be'eruvo, and he benefits with regard to the food of his eruv, because it will be available for him to eat on the second day. Now, this procedure, the commentaries explain, is practical only when Yom Tov is on Friday. Since it's permitted to carry in Yom Tov, he may take the food home with him after the first Ben Hashmashot and bring it back before the second Ben Hashmashot. But when Yom Tov is on Sunday, however, he may not carry the food back with him after the first Ben Hashmashot, because it's Shabbat at that time, when carrying is forbidden. So his only option is to leave it in place the first night and go back before Yom Tov to make sure that it's still there. Now, since the Mishnah says that the person must bring the food to the designated place and wait there until dark, it cannot refer to the owner of the eruv himself. Because we will learn that if the owner of an eruv is present at the intended place during Ben Hashmashot, he does not need to put any food there, because his very presence at that place at that time suffices to establish it as his residence, like we will learn in chapter 4, Mishnah 9. So our Mishnah therefore must refer not to the owner, but to someone who was sent by the owner to put out the food. That's why he's waiting there until dark. Ne'echal barishon eruvo larishon ve'eno eruv l'sheni. If, however, it was eaten or lost on the first day, and therefore was not in place during Ben Hashmashot on the second evening, his eruv is valid for the first day, but it is not a valid eruv for the second day. Since it was in place only during the first Ben Hashmashot and not the second one, it is effective only for the first day and not the second. Now, Rabbi Eliezer responds to the sages by pointing out a contradiction in their position. Amar lem Rabbi Eliezer said to them, Modim atem lishen shtei kiddushot. Since you said that the eruv eaten on the first day is not valid for the second day, you clearly agree with me that Shabbat and Yom Tov are two separate periods of holiness. For if they were a single period of holiness, an eruv put out during the first Ben Hashmashot would be effective for both days, regardless of what happens to it on the first day. So if so, you should agree that one can establish a separate residence for each day, if you say they're already considered as two different days. Now, in fact, the commentaries say the sages are unsure whether the 2 days form a single period of holiness or two separate periods. So in order to satisfy both possibilities, they hold that one must take the stringent position in every situation. Since the 2 days might be a single period, they ruled that a person cannot make an eruv in one place on one day and an eruv in a different place, or no eruv at all on the other day. On the other hand, since there might be two separate periods, the eruv for the first day must be in place at the beginning of the second day. And the Rav says, V'alachak Rabbi Eliezer. In this situation, the halakha actually follows Rabbi Eliezer, not the sages. The Shabbat v'Yom Tov shtei kiddushot hen, because Shabbat and Yom Tov are one period of holiness. Again, this is the opinion of the Rav, how he explains this Mishnah. And that is in Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.